I'm so happy you're here. Thank you for making the time. I really appreciate it.
Sure, of course.
Um, um, are you just home today? You're not at the office?
Yeah, I'm never in the office.
Oh, so you work remotely?
Yeah, I'm trying to avoid. I mean, the hospital still requires us to wear masks indoors, so
Mm-hmm.
you can't do therapy while wearing a mask.
Oh, oh, that's
It's like
interesting.
waterboarding someone. You have
Right,
to be.
right. Yeah, you have to see their faces. Just so that you and I can get a little acquainted, like, because I've listened to a lot of your podcast talks, like when you were a guest on other podcasts, and I really enjoyed everything you said, and you talk a little bit about your own background there too. So I'm like aware that, you're a psychologist. I know that your mother's a North Korean refugee. I know that you work with trauma, and I know that you work with children and families. Um, but
Mostly
it.
adults nowadays,
Oh, now it's mostly
actually.
adult. Oh, okay, so it's shifted a bit. Okay. But uh, I think it'd be weird if like you didn't know anything about me. So I'll just give you like a brief intro of who I am. So my name's Grace Chung. Hello. And I'm a stand up comedian, and I'm also a writer. And I'm also a PhD. I have a doctorate in film and media studies from UCLA. And this podcast is really me.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations on your achievement. Uh, but I made this podcast mainly to talk about Korean TV shows because I've been watching them all my life, and they're very popular around the globe nowadays. And I'm like, well, I have this degree. It's kind of useless at the moment in this economic recession and awful academic market. So, I'm putting it to use in my own way. And yeah, and when I was oh, and I'm also a CPTSD survivor, and I'm in therapy. My own shrink is like amazing. She's like the fifth one that I've worked with in the last 15 years, and I've been with her for 4 years now. And my work with her has been very effective. So I feel very lucky in that regard. Um, but I'm currently in the midst of rewriting a book that is going to come out in spring 2024, and it's called K Drama School, and it's basically me looking at all K dramas, analyzing them, but triangulating my analysis from a point of me as a trauma survivor, but also looking at modern Korean history and its traumas as a nation, and then looking at the inciting incidents and the traumas they're in the shows, and like what the characters are going through. And I sort of do this analysis um, of each text from that standpoint. And I've been listening to your talks on podcasts while also reading about CPTSD more in depth for my own personal growth for the most part, but also for this book. And you always say such like profound things, uh, very poetic stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I mean, I hope you write a book. I really do, because you say
I have a
really,
book
really,
agent, so it is coming.
okay, thank God, because I'm like, where's this dude's book, because when I want to talk about trauma from a Korean context, there's a whole lot of literature in academia dedicated to Korean trauma. They talk about it constantly, but it's so boring, and it's so like ineffective in its vision for healing that I find I find them frustrating. In fact, I find them very triggering as I read them. You could pretty much label anything in Korean studies to uh, be some sort of exploration of Korean trauma in
Oh,
general,
yeah. Oh,
constantly.
yeah.
Yeah.
All the violence in our movies, it's all trauma processing.
and the melodrama too, the tearfulness and the crying and the screaming and the wailing and the throwing and the blaming and it's endless. So the reason why I wanted to talk to you specifically is because, okay, like here's this doctor who's Korean American, but you're also an emigre. I mean, you were born in South Korea, right? Where in South Korea were you born?
In Seoul.
Oh, okay. So, all right. Okay. It's cool. I'm from Busan. Yeah. Um, but yeah, I'm like, like could he possibly, fill this gap when it comes to talking about Korean trauma in a more productive way while keeping this end goal of healing and processing, right? Like successfully, like as an achievement in the end. So that's why I wanted to talk to you specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But are we going to be able to use you as the nexus for all this?
Sure. Why not? I'm already in it. I'm already doing it.
And you're revealing
Yeah.
some of your stuff?
A lot of
Is
my
it okay if it
stuff.
goes a
Yeah.
little therapy-ish with you?
Totally. Please, by all means, I am open to it. I'm down. Like part of what makes this writing process so uh difficult, challenging, but in an exciting way for me is because in academia, when we write about whatever, we have to leave ourselves out. It's like mystifying everything that's personal with other people's theories and some whatever. And it's like I don't see I can't connect to it at all. But so when I'm writing this book, I'm trying to incorporate my academic rigor, but also bring in my own personal stuff. And it feels so like sacrilegious because in academic writing, we're just not, we're trained not to do that. And it's like I'm trying to amalgamate these two parts of me along with my clown self, my comedian self, my comedian voice. And it's such a new alchemy for me. And it makes it very, very challenging, but like also really exciting. So yeah, I'm like fully in the book. So yeah, and I'm fully here. This is my podcast. You are my guest. So yeah, please, by all means.
I'm getting so excited about this.
Really?
Yeah. Um, I totally geek out on this tech stuff. Do you want me to put on my over-the-ear headphones instead? Does that matter to you? So that I can like
Doesn't
hear
matter to
myself?
me.
It sounds fine as it is, huh?
It sounds fine to me. Yeah.
Okay. I'll just stay close to the mic then.
Okay.
Do you have an idea of where you're going to lead us?
Yeah, I have like a bunch of questions that I wrote down. I did like so
Okay.
much work before meeting with you today. I was like meditating, like writing things down, like reading stuff. Um, One of the first questions that I have is when you're dealing
Wait,
with,
have we already started?
oh yeah, it's been about 8 minutes in. Yeah,
Okay.
it's very in media res. That's my style. Um,
Okay.
yeah. So
Before you ask the question,
sure.
can we share an intention?
Oh, of course. Yeah, that's a really good one. Would you like to go first?
Um, uh, uh, this is gonna be so cheesy. Um,
Yes, I like cheese.
all I care about is that you heal a little bit today.
Oh, yeah, that's so nice. I feel emotional already.
I
Okay,
know.
thank you. Okay, yeah. I'm not as brave as you are. I can't go that cheesy. No. Um, I my intention is to get some answers to these questions that I have deep in me that I know is connected to a larger me, meaning my history and everything I come from, and my relatives and everything I come from. So that, I guess that's my intention, to get some answers.
Why?
Oh, because it's heavy. I mean, I don't like feeling trapped in the same few questions over and over, or the same few narratives over and over, the same few frustrations or blame or resentments over and over. So I'd like an escape from those loops, I suppose. So it's actually, our intentions are aligned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want freedom. Freedom from the burden of whatever this is.
Yeah. Yes. Freedom. Always.
Okay. Now we're ready.
Sweet. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yes. Okay. Guess my first question is a little more generic, but in your line of work, when you're dealing with Korean American patients, I wonder, like, what common through line do you see in them that you would attribute to the chaos of modern Korean history, be it colonization or the loss of a monarch, the loss of a sovereignty, uh, loss of a political infrastructure, national division, civil war, military dictatorships, the military conscription duty for all men. And then nowadays, it's the issue of the very high suicide rate in South Korea. So I wonder, when you're looking at the Korean diaspora patients, like, do you see some of those elements contributing to their current pain and sorrows? And if so, like, what through line do you see across them?
Um, One, I don't see that many Korean Americans in my practice. I have
Fascinating.
more Chinese people and
Oh.
Jewish people, obviously, because I'm in New York.
Mm-hmm.
But the cultural traumas that different different people have endured leave a very similar through line.
Okay.
Um, See, what's different about your perspective and mine is that I'm only looking at how they show up in the room.
Oh.
That's the common through line.
Okay.
Um, and what I see is what's your relationship to emotions? What's your
Mm-hmm.
relationship to vulnerability?
Mm-hmm.
How hard do you have to overachieve? That's a common through line.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
do you motivate yourself with a whip or like with true intention?
Mm-hmm.
That's a common through line. So what I'm saying is that there's the imprint of all that stuff is in the way we treat ourselves, whether or not we live life through this lens of constant survival
Mm-hmm.
versus giving ourselves time to have leisure and recreation and joy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Whether or not we allow feelings to be in us or in our children, or whether our parents allowed us to have feelings, or whether it was just like you know grades, food.
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's my my focus is on what's immediately happening in the room.
Okay. Okay. I like that. In that case, I'm gonna shift a little bit. Um, Maybe I'm not ready to shift just yet. Before that, there's one thing you mentioned, overachievement. Like, there's this drama called Sky Castle. It was the first show I covered when I started this podcast. And it's about middle-aged mothers, women, and they have children in high school, some in middle school. And these mothers are very extreme helicopter parents. These kids have to get into Seoul National University. They have to be pre-med majors, and they have to become a third generation doctor for that family lineage. That's it. Bottom line, right? And it's excessive. Yeah. Um, when I'm watching the show, it's like, all right, there are multiple issues at play, but at the core, what drives a person to overachieve with such intensity, you think?
Okay. Well, there's the cultural motivator, which is that the only way that you're going to have food, only way that you're going to have any status or be able to survive at all is through accomplishment. I,
Hmm.
I've been seeing it more clearly with my Chinese patients where like they have stories of like their parents being the sole person who passed the college exam. And it's the only way to get off the fields or in the factories. The only way to go to college is that you have to like pass this exam, this national exam.
Hmm.
And so there's this urgency, this life or death urgency to succeed. I'm
Hmm.
sure that we have the same thing. The only way
Hmm.
that the only way to be valued by the Japanese would be to be super smart.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, the only way to climb out of abject poverty is to have any financial success.
Hmm.
So that's the cultural thing. But then on a deeply interpersonal psychological level, I find that overachievement is actually a it's a proxy for seeking love.
Ah.
And my thesis is that when our parents are so focused on just surviving physically, then our emotional health is put aside, and it's
Hmm.
the next generation's job to deal with the emotional health if the
Hmm.
financial and physical health is secured. And so I think that people just they don't feel loved, valued as individuals. It's only through what you can produce. And so then accomplishment is the only way to garner attention, to garner praise. And all of those feel good. They feel like love. It's the
Hmm.
closest thing we know to love. And so we
Hmm.
chase it with a life or death energy that a baby chases being close to their parent because they would die
Yeah.
without being close to their parent.
Yeah. Or die without love.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. I had a question and then it disappeared. Maybe it's not that important or maybe it'll come back. But what happens when this, let's say, a narcissistic helicopter parent's identity merges with their child's? And or what about the opposite, when a child's identity merges with their parents? Like there, for instance, there's this one scenario. Extreme helicopter mother, she was very abusive to her son. Her son did get into Seoul National University, but the journey to that was horrendous. I mean, she would say to him, "You don't deserve to eat because you were not number one in your class. You should just go outside and die because you did not get straight A's." It's just excessive abuse, right? And very like conditioned. Um,
Excessive survival parenting.
oh, okay.
See, even the words that
Okay.
she uses, if you don't get first, you will die. If you don't get first, you won't eat.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Well, what happens is this kid gets into Seoul National University and then he immediately disappears from the mother's life. He runs away, shacks up with
I
some
know.
girl.
Yeah.
And what she does as a result of this, and I think it's because, like, I don't know, she lost her sense of self, perhaps, because it was so shocking. Um, she blows her head off with a rifle. Very, very extreme. Um,
This is
but
a
that's
true
the
story.
No, this is from Sky Castle, the
Oh,
show that I'm
got
talking
it.
about. I really hope it's not a true story, but man, like at the end of this pilot episode, I was like, I'm in. I'm gonna watch this show till the end. What a
Mhm.
dramatic ending. But she literally, I mean, she kills herself because all of her pride and joy and her ego self, like the one that's like,
Yeah.
delighting in this, like that object has now vanished. It's totally gone. And she kills herself. I mean, I guess my question is like in your definition, like how would you define the ego and the superego in relation to trauma, and perhaps even in this scenario?
Those are mixed. Ego and superego are different from what you're talking about, I think.
Oh,
Sorry for
okay.
saying that critically.
No, please, by all means.
And I'm going to avoid defining it the classic way. I think what you're really asking is something else. What was it? What is your real question, do you think? How could a
Well,
mother do this? What?
oh no, well, I guess it's more like in my reading, it was like, oh, her ego died, when her son decided to, you know, disappear from her life and reject her
Mm,
and not do the thing that she had built him up to
yes.
do. So it's like
I
her
don't
ego is
necessarily see it
obliterated.
that way.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Hmm.
See, like there's an edge of othering her in that.
Oh.
There's an edge of pathologizing her. She wouldn't agree that her ego died. How
Oh.
would she describe it? She would describe it as she failed as a mother. That
Mm.
all of her love, she thought she was doing the right thing, and then he rejected her.
Mm-hmm. It's heartbreak. Yeah. Okay. This is good. This is helpful for me because no, I enjoy intellectualizing. Because,
Well,
it
it's
brings a
I'm
high.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
sorry for this.
No, it's okay.
It's both intellectualizing, and
Yeah.
there's a tinge of something in it. There's a tinge
Yeah.
of justifiable anger that at her actions,
Uh-huh.
that she was so hard on this kid that he would
Uh-huh.
be willing to run away from her and never see her again. It
Right.
is it is like something that we don't want.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then for me, the question is, why would she go to such lengths if not for the need to survive? That she was that desperate that this was the only way to succeed. Somehow this was
Right.
instilled in her that if you're not number one, you will die and you will not eat.
Mm-hmm.
She was living that viscerally in her parenting.
Mm-hmm.
It was all misattuned to him because he was not hungry or going to get shot if he wasn't number one. But her survival instincts that were hardwired into her from the histories of trauma that are hardwired into us intergenerationally,
Mm-hmm.
that's what was ruling her.
Right.
Um, so it's not about ego. It's all just about survival.
Mm. Okay, yeah. You time and time again in your other podcast talks, you always bring up this word poignancy, um, repeatedly. And I was just like, okay. I wonder if it's similar to this, like you're trying to find like a very human balance. Like, okay, we acknowledge that what she did was painful for this young man. And the show does vilify her, frames her in that. Um, but also frames her as a mother in despair too, you know? Like she's crying a lot and she's obviously in desperate straits. Um, and I think you're trying to bring that into my awareness too right now by sort of trying to capture the poignancy of that motherhood, of that
The
identity,
tragedy of it.
perhaps. Yeah, the heartbreak of it. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, that it's more than just, about her bragging rights, Yeah, perhaps like that is in there, but it's there alongside her intense love for her son. Her And it's like, well, how does she define that love? Oh, with success. He needs to succeed. He needs to be set up for greatness and he needs to do well. Um, Alongside all of that. Yeah. Um, like,
No.
yeah, please.
Can I?
Of course.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
What I if we were in a real therapy session,
Mm-hmm.
then what I'd want to do is that I wouldn't want you to feel like, oh, that was wrong of me to do that to her,
Mm-hmm.
to somehow vilify
Yeah.
her. It's
Yeah.
actually like, oh, isn't it interesting that there was an urge to be angry at her? That, and then we would go into what is your own anger at this archetype of mother, this oppressive, misguided mother archetype about,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
then we would honor the validity of your anger
Mm-hmm.
in like what happened to me and what happens to the children of trauma survivors is not right.
Mm-hmm.
It's not fair.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
your anger is like a compass to how things should have been or what
Mm-hmm.
is wrong. And so
Mm-hmm.
you honor the anger. And then as you honor the anger, it invites the grief and the loss of what didn't happen, of what you didn't get or what we didn't get as children because of survival parenting.
Mm-hmm.
We invite that part of us to come into this space between us too.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate you taking the time to note that. Um, no, absolutely. Like when I look at, I don't know, when I look at like what I do in my own work, I get emotional flashbacks daily and multiple times throughout the day. It's not as bad as my 20s. In my 20s, it was like every minute I would be triggered or my head would be in some place. And I remember constantly saying like I want to blow my fucking head off, or or when I looked in the mirror, I would say that too. Like, but it was very intense because it was like a constant. But now it's not as frequent, but I still get them daily, and it's usually the inner critic voice, the staff sergeant marine, um, and it's like I always have to take the time to ask them like, so what's up? Like, what can I do? Like, what are you here to tell me? And I go through that. And it starts at the place of fight where I'm angry and triggered. But once I acknowledge it, it turns to a sort of a place of emotionality. Like there's a lot of crying, there's some kind of grieving, mourning, and then immediately it shifts to gratitude. I've always noted that it goes from anger to grief to gratitude. Like gratitude is the first thing that comes up because it's like my inner child is like, thank you so much for for doing that for me. And then once I get to the gratitude part, that's when I can notice like, oh, whatever enemy I had, alongside them there was some guardian who was intervening, or that enemy figure themselves, the parent figure, the authority figure who was abusive, they also had sides of being a guardian as well. And it's like, I feel safe enough to invite those parts in. Yeah. And I think that's what you were sort of helping me do with this character on Sky Castle. I want to ask you this. Uh, when we're watching media, like when we're watching TV, um, like, is it possible to experience some kind of cathartic healing from that? Like watching television when we feel some, because people cry while watching TV or movies, they laugh real hard or they get angry, but it's a very visceral and emotional kind of experience. And I wonder, like, in what way can that sort of connect to therapy, if at all?
Um, the only answer I can come up with is something about reintegration of yourself. And what trauma does to people is that it makes you a fractured person.
Mm-hmm.
You're completely divided from really understanding the connections between your head, heart, body, and soul.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you can't cry for your own stuff because it's too vulnerable. Your protectors won't let you. And like a movie or music or something else can kind of come in through the side door and
Mm.
awaken the parts of you that are in pain that aren't allowed time in your consciousness. And in
Mm.
that way, it really depends on what they do in the moment of crying. If they say stupid movie,
Ah.
then they're not healing. They're not taking it all the way. If they get mad at themselves or laugh at themselves and kind of make light of it, then they're not making use of that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
If they see that this is awakening in them something inside of them that needed to be acknowledged, held, hugged, and then they really go through the process of saying, I understand why this is so meaningful to me and why I'm crying here, and I love you to the part that's hurting.
Hmm.
Then you're making it into a healing experience.
I see. Man, I love that. Okay. I think I'm ready to do the shift now. Um, and I was like, like I was debating so hard whether or not to talk about this, but I think you'd appreciate it. So, my father served in the Marines. I know you mentioned your father also served in the military. Do you remember like which, like was it a Marine or
No.
Navy or Army? Don't know.
I think he was a drill sergeant. I don't know which
Okay.
branch.
Hmm. So my dad was a Marine, and his eldest brother, who's 25 years older, and my dad
Wow.
never really knew his father, so his eldest brother was like a father figure to him. He either served in the Korean War or was like being trained right thereafter. So either way, I mean, the Korean War never officially ended, but
Right.
either way, this uncle, this kunabaji of mine, saw and experienced things while training as a Marine that were horrific. And when he got back home, he had full PTSD. He was a madman. He used to run around town with like a sickle, like threatening to kill people. He was an alcoholic. Everybody on my father's side was an alcoholic. My dad's an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic, but in recovery. And uh, yeah, like so this father figure terrorized my dad. This was just a monster to my dad. And when my dad when my dad's conscription came, he had to go and serve. He was chosen for the Marines. And there's something about the Marines that is particularly painful for soldiers. They go through a lot, like I mean they all do, like the Navy, Army, Air Force, they all do, but the Marines in particular go through some intense hardship. So my dad served. When he got back home, this this older brother of his, the eldest brother of his, came running to my father, crying hysterically, and held my dad and said, "You served in the Marines. Like that's where I served." You know, he's like, it was so painful
Wait, why was it painful? Like, oh
because it
no, I
was
didn't want that to happen to you too, or now we're
because
bonded.
he yeah, like he experienced such brutality when he was serving in the Marines, and he now knows what his youngest brother went through, and he feels bad. It
Okay.
was like this. It was empathy, compassion that my dad never got from his madman of an older brother. And my dad said that in that moment, this tiger of a brother of his, who abused him all throughout his childhood, was just fully humanized for him in that moment. Um, sorry, I'm like getting emotional now because I just saw my parents. They were visiting just last week, and I have a very fraught relationship with them. But the visit was fine. It was all like pretty gravy. But there's this dream I had when I was 14. I was 14 years old, and I had this dream that I was a male soldier. I was in my uniform, and I was in a dugout in the earth, and I was laid out, and it was pouring rain, and it was my body was like being covered with the water coming up, and my legs were covered, like blanketed with mosquitoes. It was unreal to me how many mosquitoes there could be when there's rain coming down that hard. And I was miserable. I was in so much agony. I was like, oh my God, I want to die. This is like hell. This is utter hell. And then
And you were
the dream,
laying down like as if you were in a grave?
no, 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 no. It was just like a dugout. Like, you know how soldiers have to lie low? I was kind of like lying low, and it was raining so hard that the water was kind of coming up. But I wasn't fully
Okay.
submerged. But the water was kind of coming up, and my legs were covered in mosquitoes. I was being bitten. And then I was
You were
writing a,
crouched down. Sorry, I
yeah,
just need to get the visuals correct.
I was horizontally lying down like this. My legs are here, I'm
Oh,
here, and the water is kind of like coming up around my belly area because there's like a slight dugout under my
got it.
ass area, and my legs are covered in mosquitoes. These mosquitoes were vicious. They were relentless. It was like, oh my God, what's wrong with them? And then I was writing a letter home. I couldn't tell to who, but I knew it was a woman. It was either a mother or a sister. I knew it was family. And writing this letter, I missed them so much that I was bawling my eyes out. Yeah. And then I woke up and then I went to the kitchen, I mean, to the dining room, and I saw my dad eating, and I told him this dream. And he looked at me like with full pause, and he was like, that's what I went through when I was serving in the military. And then we didn't go into it that much thereafter, but when I saw him last week, I brought this dream up again. And then I asked him specifically, I was like, were there that many mosquitoes when it was pouring rain? And he took a pause and he looked at me dead in the eye and said, you would not believe how many mosquitoes there were. Because it's the summer when he was this one particular night. It was the summer, and summer's monsoon season in Korea, pouring rain, and his military uniform had this like porous leather, like a poncho to cover from the rain, and these mosquitoes would pierce through the leather. I mean, that's how intense they were. And he said that, you know, it was like such a painful time for him. Now, I'm reading also about like epigenetics and intergenerational trauma, and I just want to ask, like, I mean, are there instances where children can recall their parents' past traumas through in the form of dreams? Yeah, I guess that's my question.
That's such a
Why?
the question doesn't fit with the story.
Yeah, I'm
The,
interested in whatever you have to say about the whole
I
thing, I
know,
guess.
I know. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's
This is
okay.
part of my I swear, I'm so like I come across so curt and brusque,
Oh yeah,
just to
I
say things out
appreciate that
loud.
though. Yeah, no, no, I appreciate it. It makes us feel close.
I know. It's very Asian.
Yeah.
Um, my honest response to it is like, one, I suspend disbelief about any of this. I
Mm-hmm.
love believing in shamanism, magic, past lives, dreaming your father's experience, and not because I want to prove that this stuff can happen, but because it makes life so much more poetic, and it gives depth to the experience of living. So I choose to believe that somehow you were able to dream your father's dream on one level. Let's use that as the operating framework first.
Okay.
Then the question is, why would you do that? It must be such a yearning love to reach him. Maybe, I don't know. How did you understand you dreaming about him?
Well, I'm a very vivid dreamer in general, and I place a lot of meaning to my dreams in general because, as you say, it just makes life more fun. And I just read it in that way as just like, oh, this is a cool thing that I
But did
got
you
to
hear
do
your
this.
story? You started
Yeah.
with this chapter about his own older brother being in the Marines, and then hugging him and being human in that brief
Mm-hmm.
moment when they finally shared a common experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why I viewed this dream as your attempt to reach your dad. And like the only way that your dad was able to reach his brother was by going through the same experience he did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
you took it upon yourself to tell him the same story again when you saw him recently.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, to have him sober, to wake, and meet you with full pause, without all
Mm-hmm.
these enactments.
Mm-hmm.
And you're tearing up even now as you're hearing this. What is
Yeah.
the emotion here?
Um, well, there's a little bit of defensiveness, but I I cry a lot. It's okay. Um, well, no, I think you're right. I think my dad, that experience that my dad had, and then that story my dad told me last week, which was the first time I heard that story, the one about his oldest brother.
Oh,
It was the first time I heard it, you know. Like growing up, my dad was such a violent person. You know what I mean? Like both my parents beat the shit out of me. Um, but when my dad did it, it was like it sucked even more. I mean, just from my retrospective feminist kind of way, it's like how could a father hit his daughter? You know. Um, and so I've always resented this violent side of him, which stems from the military training, but also from his own childhood traumas, the childhood abuse that he suffered at the hands of his father figure, his brother. Um, and yeah, like while I sort of tucked away this dream, this soldier dream that I had when I was 14, I kind of shelved it away as like, oh, this is just like a cool thing, like a cool psychic dream I had, you know? When you said that that's actually me loving my father, trying to reach him in that way, it's like, oh, you're right. Like, I'm trying to find a way to have compassion for him, you know, to empathize with his pain. Where does that violence come from? You know, it's like this is the poignancy thing that's happening. Like, when I saw my parents last week, what I felt like I was doing in my brain was like I felt like a tree holding up multiple branches all at once, holding everything up. Like all my muscles in my body and everything was holding them up like this, like an acrobat, which is something I'm not quite used to doing. It's a lot easier for me and other trauma victims to sever things in a binary of good and bad, safe versus evil. Um, but what this was is like, there are all these other smaller branches and leaves in between. They're not just good versus bad. They're a whole spectrum of humankind, and I'm holding them all up in recognition of that in an acrobatic position with full balance. And I was like, this is such an interesting feeling. I'm not used to this, but I appreciate it. I think I'm developing a new muscle or skill that I like. And I think that's this what you just read or analyzed through me is helping me do the same right now.
yeah. All I can do now is to share the vision that I was having as you were speaking. And there's really, I can't even figure out why I'm doing it. There's no point to it, I think. So I'm just going to say to see where it lands. When I saw the image of the tree holding up this complexity, um, one, I fucking love trees. And I think they're like a source of wisdom. And what I was wondering about was that as you're able to hold complexity and as you're like flourishing and branching out and not just being a binary trunk, what's your root system like?
Mm.
Are you rooting yourself, getting grounded? And what does that mean?
Just yesterday, I had a Reiki session with a friend she's just starting out at Reiki. And I told her I have insomnia. I was like, I got my migraine thing. I have that under control. My insomnia, I've had it since childhood. I need to sleep, man. And she was like, when you meditate, do you imagine yourself rooting down, like out of your ass, like from your root chakra? Do
Yeah.
you imagine yourself rooting down? And I was like, no. I was like, my head is bouncing off in a billion different directions, and they always go to a dark place, and I'm always trying to bring them back into my breathing. That's the work that I do all day and every day. It's up here, here always,
Mm,
like from here up. It's never, I kind of
no.
neglect my lower self. And she was like, next time try and do that. Try to root yourself and ground yourself. And this past year is very, very new. But okay, so both my parents, grandparents' side, they're all Buddhist. And then my parents decided to become born again Protestants. It's like a whole layer of trauma there for me. But that Protestant pursuit severs us from chisha, ritual, ancestral rite, all of that severs. So we grew up not doing that. Also, my family's the only one that immigrated to the US. All of my relatives live in Korea. So we couldn't even go to Chesa and participate. Not that my parents even would want to, because they find that like, oh, that's a big no-no in Christianity. But what I've been doing since last year, late last year, is I would leave out just a small bowl of water and like maybe a piece of fruit, light incense, and say a small prayer. Because before, the prayer was to my higher self and to a divine source. But now I include my ancestors in that. Yeah. And I'm doing that in an effort to root down and ground down, I guess. So that's my answer to that.
And I once a friend of mine, I was working in a clinic, and she disappeared for 3 years, and she came back. She had gone off and learned Native American shamanism,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was like, "Sign me up, let's do it." And then we did some soul retrieval work and other kind of ceremonial stuff. And in one of the healing ceremonies that we did, I retrieved a hurt inner child from the depths of hell, and then I flew out of hell. I went to this mausoleum in Boston. It has the oldest cemetery in the U.S., oldest garden cemetery in the U.S. And I went into one of the mausoleums there, and it was my ancestral mausoleum. And inside there were all these banners in the chamber, and this lion spirit animal of mine started to shred all of the banners, and like blood was just like pouring out of these things and filling up the room. It was like a flood of blood. And as it was happening, it was like the most horrific thing. I didn't know whether to stop the lion from like mauling all these banners. But then as the banners were being shred, a spirit was freed from the banner. And each one was an ancestor of mine. And with each one I bowed, and I felt them saying to me, "You do not have to carry our burden anymore. You're free."
I love that. It's beautiful. Did you explore Korean shamanism like Mudang at all?
I am very far removed from any historical, cultural rootedness.
Oh.
But I wouldn't be surprised if there's some lineage, something about me that's rooted in some of that stuff. Although I know that shamanism is reserved for mostly women in Korea, but I consider my spirit to be more feminine anyway. So
Yeah. They have male shamans too. There's like one Mudang in LA. He's a dude. He went to Hawaii for a retreat. It's interesting. But yeah, there are plenty of male shamans, but you're right. The majority tend to be women. It's a fascinating story. What's your zodiac?
Pisces.
Get out. Me too. When's your birthday?
March 17.
Are you into zodiacs at all?
I, again, play with it for fun. So I don't
Yeah.
memorize it. Whenever I've had my birth chart read, it's always like freaked me out that it's so accurate.
Yeah.
And then the way that I use it scientifically or like as a clinical tool is that it
Mm.
reminds me that we're all different, that we're all like, there's at least 12 different types of us out there if we're going
Yes.
by like whatever zodiac stuff. And so
Yes.
the way that I operate in life is unique to me and other Pisces, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
And so it keeps me humble in presuming that people should be a certain way based on what I've learned in life.
Ah, okay. That's a wise answer. Yeah, no, the Pisces zodiac is considered like the psychic one, like very dreamy, you know.
Oh
Can you
God, yeah.
recall your dreams?
Oh, I'm like super like I'm barely tethered to this planet. So
Yeah. Do you like write down your dreams, or did you ever experience like precognitive dreaming or things like that?
I don't think so. I've stopped
Mm.
dreaming. I'm too tired. But I can't wait for more like non-ordinary states of consciousness to be legalized and to be able to use that for therapy, because a lot of the work that I do is very much like non-linear, non-scientific, non-narrative. Like even you, like as we were talking about your being in your head so much, I would want to make you become more poetic, more abstract, expressionistic, to wail
Mm-hmm.
more, to not to like turn off your head.
To not turn off my head?
I'm sorry, to turn off your head.
Yeah, trust me, that is, I wish I could. Like, every night it's a battle. I'm like, all right, it's time to settle down. They don't settle down, you know? It's always lit up. And that was part of my abuse problem. Like, I quit alcohol 3 years ago. Um, I smoke pot every now and then, but that's a slippery slope. But yeah, my addiction to substance abuse, even food addiction and screen addiction, it's mainly because I want to get away from myself, my head. Um, it's very noisy up there. Um, but okay. No, I love all this. I love that you're
What
Pisces.
I want to say one thing about what I'm always trying to convince my patients to do, which they think is ridiculous. And most of mental health is oriented around the philosophy that you're supposed to get rid of and alleviate symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, my belief is that you actually have to like uh, deep dive into your suffering.
Like lean
You have to,
into it.
oh yeah, you have to like be rattled. You have to like experience it. Like
Oh.
so much of trauma is about like avoiding bad things from ever happening again or experiencing the things that happened to us.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So it's
So
not
you're saying
because
kind of,
I'm sadistic. It's not that
yeah.
I want you to be in pain. It's
Uh-huh.
that the
Uh-huh.
only way that I think that you can ever release the pain is to actually
Mm-hmm.
let it course through you in the way that it unfortunately needed to, and
Mm-hmm.
you dissociated or blocked it from happening when it was
Right.
overwhelming. But now that you're
Uh-huh.
safe, can you let
Yeah.
the pain course through you so that it can be
Right.
free? You can be free of it.
So
It's
in
a
this
scary
case,
process.
so in this case, the insomnia sort of let it happen, just kind of sit with it, be with it, and then let that course through me. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but that's gonna become stupid. Like you're gonna be like, fuck that Dr. Hom. He's like so stupid. Like at night, like at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're gonna be so like
Yeah,
pissed
because
off
I'm
at me. You're
literally
like,
up till 3, 4 a.m. Yes.
I
Yes.
know. It's not that actually. It's like when you see a spark of emotion, do
Okay.
you allow yourself to feel it? When you feel
Mm.
yourself pushing something away and you feel the urge to drink or something like that, can
Mm-hmm.
you choose to say like, I allow myself to know what this is?
Hmm.
Like you're doing
I
great
see.
today. Like, well, no, there was this one moment when you cried and I wanted to ask you why, and then you didn't, or you moved on to your dream. You went, it, it doesn't. It was something about when you were talking about having seen your parents
Mm-hmm.
But next time I see that you're getting emotional, do you mind if I interrupt you and we'll just pause and you
By
allow
all
yourself to
means.
know what the feeling is?
Yes, by all means. I give you full reign. Yeah, this is more of an honor for me. So yeah, by all means, I'm down. Even yesterday, like when my friend was doing Reiki, like she's very new at it, but I'm like, I'm okay with being a guinea pig. It's totally fine. Um,
And you say that with full clarity and intention, or are you saying that in a
uh-huh.
dissociated way?
No, I'm excited for it. Like I'm always
Okay.
down for an adventure. Yes, yeah.
Okay. Great.
Because and I like that you're open to these other like forms of therapy as well. Because like my shrink, she uses transpersonal psychology. In my
Mm-hmm.
own work for myself, I also like I'll do like mushroom trips like a couple times a year or LSD trips a couple times a year to reset, to gain
Are you
perspective.
with
I'll
sitters?
the first time, yes, but thereafter I always do it alone because
Mm.
I get too distracted by other people. But if I feel like I'm in a difficult spot, I know who to call. And I've only had to do that once. So like I kind of prepare myself for things. Um, yeah. But thanks for asking because, safety is important. But
No, not just safety.
hmm,
It's to it's so that you feel safe enough to go deeper and darker.
oh, I see. You know, yeah, I hadn't considered that because when I'm with myself, I feel like I can go deeper and darker, maybe. I think that's why I choose to do it alone because if I'm with somebody, like the caretaker part of me is like a little too, you know, with the other person,
But but I would contend that that's the first thing you can work on then.
the
To
caretaking
in
part.
the Yeah, as soon as you're going
Mm,
in, know that they are there for you. It's all about tending to you. And then that becomes a profound experience in the
yeah.
non-ordinary state.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not very good at that. I'm
I
not good
know.
at accepting compliments either. Like a few months ago, a friend of mine complimented me. He's like, "You're a good writer, Grace." And I remember just staring straight ahead, like fully ignoring him, like pretending like it's not happening. And I was like, why do I do that? I need to get to the bottom of this. And I realized it's because it's love coming in. And I'm like, I don't feel safe when that happens. A compliment is love coming in. They just say it, but in my head, it's love coming in. And I'm rejecting it in my head because it's like, I don't feel safe. Stop it. Another
Yeah.
thing I noticed over the weekend is I was at a friend's birthday party. It was all her friends, and they were showing an interest in me and my work, and it felt so uncomfortable. I'm like, stop asking questions about me and my work. They're like, oh, you're writing a book? Oh, you do comedy? Can I come see? Oh, like, what is your comedy about? And I was just like, oh my God, you need to shut the hell up. It felt like a nightmare. That I need to explore further too, but I think it's the same thing. It's just love coming in, interest, attention. And I'm like, stop it. What the hell? Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
sorry. My brain's not responding to that because the only things that it could come up with would be something trite. Because
Okay.
you already know. Like, I think everyone would have an urge to say something about how you need to let love come in, or like you need to learn
Mm-hmm.
to love yourself, some
Mm-hmm.
crap like that. But in
Yeah.
that moment, it felt like you were already in that space of knowing all these things, and you were
Mm-hmm.
just looking at yourself without being judgmental or needing to fix it. You're just acknowledging that this is where you are in your growth.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. Like like I like nature, right? I like planting things, gardening. Both sides of my grandparents are all farmers. I lived with my maternal grandparents when I was young for like several months at a time when I was very young. And growing up on their farm, there were like cows and pigs and chickens and cabbages and radishes and mushrooms and a creek. And it was like very, idyllic but I have this like morbid fear of worms and maggots. They freak me out. And like I went mushroom foraging recently and I found these worms inside the mushroom caps and I was like screaming in my kitchen and I remember asking
Mm.
myself out loud. I was like, "Grace, are you going to let some worms get in the way of your love for mushroom foraging?" And I was like, "In this moment, yeah." Like this is where I'm at. They scare me. I can't do it, you know?
Mm.
Like I hope to get over it at some point, but worms scare the bejesus out of me.
I personally think mushrooms are also creepy as fuck.
Oh, really? I love
Yeah.
mushrooms.
And what what's what's true about mushrooms and worms are that they are part of the process of rebirth, of death and rebirth.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I would imagine that this is all part of that same need to to go into the suffering part. In the
Mm-hmm.
psychedelic world, they talk about having like allowing yourself to die, allowing yourself to have ego death, but even to
Mm-hmm.
have like cycles of birth and death. In a way, it's like if you realize that the mushrooms and worms are doing their part in allowing you to regenerate as a
Mm-hmm.
fresh new person in the spring, then maybe there's some love for their part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
I had this
I love
dream
that.
where um, I gave birth to light and dark,
Oh my gosh.
like, and I told dark, you have to take care of your sister. She's
Mm-hmm.
ephemeral, light, and you're strong. You're like pewter. But people are going to vilify you. They're going to misunderstand you. They're going to renounce you. They're not going to understand what your job is. And I'm sorry that you have to go through this. And I just like cried and cried for this son of mine who was going to have to carry so much on his back to uphold the light.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
without the two of them, nothing would exist. The,
Mm-hmm.
the, the, the shadows create the contrast. The shadows are like the fabric of the universe, the substance of the universe, and light dances on it to create the things that exist in it. They dance, they play, they swirl,
Mm-hmm.
they cycle. So in that way, I've been trying to embrace and appreciate the light part, the spring and the winter, the the living and the dying processes of life.
Mm-hmm. You gave birth to yin and yang, and yin and yang have they're gendered, feminine and masculine, and in yin and yang they have a speck of black and a speck of white in both. There's this I think he's a physicist or theorist. Is it Goethe or anyway? It's this guy. His theory says that in light prism, like darkness, what we see with our eyes as darkness is actually another spectrum of light. So his argument is that light penetrates everything, even in the darkest black. There's that's
That's true.
actually a that's actually a tone of light. And I was like, that is so profound, you know? Um, I love that dream though. And I love how like this is like where I kind of look up to you and admire you because you're always kind of down with the dark stuff. Like you don't seem so afraid of it. Whereas I'm still kind of afraid of it. Yeah. Not that I'm not like not willing to look at it, you know? Like my mother is that way. She disassociates a lot, blanks out. stares out the window a lot. You know, if I say things that make her uncomfortable, she ignores me, disappears. Um, Whereas my dad is a little bit more grounded and he's okay with looking at the darkness, given his family history, I guess. Um, but yeah, like I'm trying to reach that place, you know, of like, I guess letting earthworms crawl inside of me and mushrooms grow in my face. Yeah.
And what I'm saying is that I'm not detached while those things are happening to me. I
Yes.
just surrender to the terror of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I like there's a part of me that wants to fight and run and
Yeah.
yeah, just be overwhelmed.
Okay. What do you tell yourself to like keep yourself present and there?
Mm, nothing. I just
Oh,
yeah, see that's the part where I'm trying to just become awareness without self-talk.
yeah. Yeah. I love that. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'll choose to run away. Sometimes things are too hard. And then other times I'll be able to, for some reason, be able to endure it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just let my body choose.
Mm. Yeah. Let your body choose. That's deep. Okay. We're running out of time, but I have two more questions. Is that okay? And then we can wrap up.
Yeah.
That's all right with you. Um, yeah, when you said awareness, I was like, oh, that's so Ram Dass. Like, um, when I was like in sixth grade, it was a particularly rough time for me because that's right around the time around sixth grade, seventh grade is when my childhood sexual traumas came up for me. Like when I was young, my parents had this tendency to leave me at other relatives' homes, which is very
Mm.
common in Korea, but causes a lot of developmental trauma. And in this one particular case, I was 4. I was left at an aunt's house, my dad's older sister's house, who already had an older daughter, so she wasn't interested in having a toddler in her house, and she kept telling me to go outside and play. And one of those days when I went outside to play, there was a predator neighbor. And around seventh grade is when that memory came up while I was reading a memoir about a woman who went through childhood molestation. But in sixth grade, I was going through, adolescence and just whatever difficulties with parents and other authority figures in the Korean American community. And I had this dream. At the time, I was going to church, and it was Christ. It was Jesus. He and I were standing next to my fishbowl where I had guppies, and there was like morning light coming in, and he was just standing there with me. We didn't say anything. Yeah. Like full awareness, full attention, just full love. That's what I felt. And I told my parents about this dream, and all they wanted to know was, what did he say? What did he say? What did he say? And the thing is, like, he didn't say anything, right? But I'm a kid, and I'm like, I have to come up with some kind of answer. So I was like, I don't know. He just told me to, like, just try really hard at things and that I'll get them. I don't know. I made up some bullshit. And then they put me up at the church in front of people in the congregation, like, tell them what Jesus said to you. And I said the same. He just like told me to try hard in life and that, things will work out. But that is not what happened. Christ didn't say anything, man. All he did was stand there next to me. Full awareness, full love, full presence. Morning light
That's it.
coming in, fishbowl, me, him. That's it. Yeah.
That's our best self.
Yes. I think that's what, like, people say, what is source or what is the divine? Like, what is light? I think that's what that is.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, it's love. It's
It's
this
just love. Yeah.
contemplative, compassionate love. But then the question is, how do you be that embodied in this human form? And that answer to me is that you suffer the throes of life. You
Hmm.
cry when you're supposed to cry, and you're scared, and you love, and you enjoy things, but try to do it with as much awareness and savoring it as
Right.
much as possible.
Right. Because it goes back to how you analyzed like my storytelling and my dream about my dad and his marine thing. It's like, oh, like to me, I hear you reaching for your father, like reaching for his love or, loving him. And it's like, oh, I don't know, like Tara Brock was talking about this. She's like, when somebody dies, we feel sad and we cry, but that's just evidence that we loved that person. Like when I break a mug I really cherish, it breaks my heart. It sucks. And it's just like, I really loved that mug, right? So in these moments of like heartbreak or some kind of mourning, it's like, oh, this is evidence of love yet again, right? And if we read it in that way, then it's like, oh, like love is always here. I guess it's another way of looking at it.
I
Mm.
as well as that answer, which I believe is that I've been trying to think that this is like analytic idealism, philosophically speaking, that everything's
Okay.
just consciousness, and
Mm.
in a way, like reality and the universe and our existence is consciousness wanting to savor every possible version of itself. And so, for some reason, consciousness wanted to savor exquisite grief. And so, my job is
Mm.
just to grieve and map out the contours of exquisite grief.
Mm-hmm.
And again, not to be a masochist about it,
Right.
but to throw yourself into it. Like, I've had horrible things happen to me, and I would say, like, okay, bring it. And then I'd be like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I can't breathe. When I'm in this much grief, I'm bowled over with pain and I can't catch my
Right.
breath.
Right.
Wow, this is really hard. Look at how bad this hurts. Like the whole body
Uh-huh.
contracts
Yeah.
and it feels like it's never going to end.
Yeah.
But these are all just like phenomena that I'm data collecting for as consciousness.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And then it sucks for months. And then one day I wake up and there's less grief. I'm like, oh, interesting. Look at that. There's like a respite from grief. How interesting is that? And then you
Mm-hmm.
allow consciousness to fill that moment, and that expands it. And then suddenly your consciousness is re-engaged with the universe again.
Yes. Yes. It's like the wheels of like samsara or karma or like the wheel of fortune card in tarot. It's similar to how like when I do inner child work with myself, going from anger to sadness to gratitude. It's like it goes through this cycle. Yeah. And while doing so, it's like there's a greater expansion. Like you're saying, oh, I add that to my consciousness. It's like, oh, you're adding that to the expansion of your consciousness. Yeah. I love that.
One thing that you did that I noted, and I don't know how much time we have to go into it, but you started that story about the dream of Jesus with your experience of your childhood thing.
Hmm.
Why?
Yeah.
Well, how is that connected?
I think he was preparing me for something because it was just 1 year after that I had that dream when that trauma surfaced. I think it was like preparing me, like kind of be like, brace yourself, or don't forget this moment because something rough is coming. That's why I started there.
Ooh, that's
Yeah,
cool.
thanks for mentioning that. Because I had that dream, but I tucked it away for a long time. And then last year, while napping during the day, I had a dream that in my dream altar space, like which is like just a room, it's high up on a mountain, there's a window that's looking out, and there's like you could look down into the slope of the valley. But in that room, which had no light, there was sunlight coming in, but it was like midday afternoon light. There was a big fish tank in the middle and beautiful fish, but they were all dying. They were all sinking. and I was freaking out because I was like, oh my God, who's gonna clean this dead fish? I hate dead fish. Like, and I was going through my Rolodex of contacts in my head. I was like, I could call this guy or this guy, all dudes. I'm like, no, they're such losers. Like, I can't depend on them. Like, this sucks. Like, I'm stuck with the fish. I have to clean it myself. And then I woke up, and then I was scared because, you know, dead fish, just like in general symbology, is like a bad omen, blah blah blah. And then a friend of mine who's like into this stuff says to me, she's like, the higher consciousness never punishes us. And she was like, so don't think of it as a bad omen. It's trying to get your attention. And that's when that childhood Jesus dream surfaced. So the reason why I mentioned that Jesus dream in connection to that childhood trauma is because, again, I think there was like this constant envelope of love or arc of love that's
That's right.
like keep going because there's a point. Like there, it's
Yes.
gonna come and it's gonna become a circle. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Um, I had two thoughts. One is like the dead fish are like embrace the worms and the mushrooms. Again, that same idea.
Oh.
Um, there was another thing that I had noted that I didn't quite fold in yet. In your dream about your father, or as your father, he was reaching out to the women in the family.
Yes.
I think that's significant. And
Mm-hmm.
it almost feels like a little bit of yin in his yang or something like that, where even you like he was a monster to you as a child, but he was also the one that you yearned for most, and you were angry at most.
Yeah.
And in that dream, you were able to see that he too was yearning for love.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Like I felt it on a very like visceral level. I felt it as if it was my own, the missing my sisters or my mother, the misery of that moment, wanting to be in their warm embrace and being comforted by these women rather than being in this hell of the military that I'm stuck in this horrible
Mm.
environment. I felt it as if
The
it was my
other,
own. Yeah.
the other interpretation, if we were to play with an intrapsychic interpretation, there's a part of you that you vilify, the angry part,
Mm-hmm.
the one that's always in pain and fighting for survival. And you're trying to make peace with that part too, and see that that part is also intentioned to seek love and understanding.
That I like, that it's seeking love. Because right now I'm in a place where I'm trying to make friends with that side. Like when I think back on the times when I was acting out a lot as a child, like at this point in my life, I look back at her and I'm like, good for you. You know, I'm like so on her side, right? Like every time she throws a fit or goes shoplifting or like
Yes,
whatever, I'm like on her
you
side,
have
you
to.
know?
Good.
But I'm still struggling with like more older parts of me who's done that. Yeah. And it's like it's a battle, but I'm trying to get to the other side. Like I'm in the net of that threshold right now, trying to push through and get to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
But I like how you frame it that way, that the anger part is also with this intention of seeking love or getting to love. I think that that's going to help me with that journey a great deal. So thank you for saying that. Um, the one thing I wanted to mention was because you always mention the Hulk as a metaphor. I was wondering if you saw that movie, The Iron Giant.
No, I didn't.
Okay. Because, you know, when you talk about trauma, how it obliterates or fractures the self, right? But in healing, it's about piecing those parts back together to become the whole. Yeah, I recommend The Iron Giant to you. I think you'd love this film. It's based on a Ted Hughes book. Man, the ending. I think you'd appreciate it. So that's my contribution to you in return for this amazing
Thank you.
talk with me. Thank you so much.
I have to. We have to wrap up in a certain way. We have to come back to our intention.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Did you get answers that help liberate you from your burden?
Yes.
Okay. You feel. How do you feel in your body?
My chest area feels a little lighter right now.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you for asking me. How do you feel?
Um, I don't know. I'm a nervous wreck. So
Really?
like, yeah, my heart's racing. I'm like clammy and sweaty.
Oh,
So
yeah. You're
I've
not a
just been.
performer. Sorry about that. I should have been more mindful of that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, no, it's
Yeah.
more that I was working really hard. Yes, you're right. I and the aspect of it being observed adds another
Yeah,
layer of
you're on
stress.
camera. It's more higher
Yeah,
pressure. But I didn't get any sense of that. I thought you
I
were
know.
amazing. Thank you. Yeah, you're good. You're you're really good. Yeah. All right.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hum.
Of course. Thank you.